Welcome to Grassroots Safety Conversations with Ross. I'm your host, and yes, my name is Ross. Look, these podcasts hopefully will generate original, bottom-up solutions for sustainable ideas and improvement in safety awareness with real people sharing their real-world experiences. As your host, I've worked in the industry for over 40 years and consider myself a safety professional who has worked at the grassroots, in corporate environment, and also in the OH regulator environment. In saying this, my views and discussion in these podcasts are from my own experience as a safety professional. They are as is and do not reflect any official policy or position of the organisation that I've worked in and are currently working in. That's a legal bit covered anyway, as they say. The aim of my podcast is to try to demystify how complex safety has become and give solutions that I've used and still using in my day-to-day role as a safety advisor, mentor or consultant, or generally go-to guy. These conversations will cover safety-related topics from OH&S or WHS systems, depends what part of Victoria or the state you're in or in Australia, around education, and also around the C words. And I mean, what is culture, consultation, how do we communicate, and the crap factor. And look, we all know the crap factor. We have to put up with a lot of stuff in safety that people put forward and doesn't make any sense. Well, I can tell you sometimes it doesn't. In addition, I plan to have some special guests discussing their own safety challenges in the workplaces and in their career. And this will be very interesting to say the least. And hopefully the next podcast I'll have an astute colleague come along. He's going to interview me a little bit, so you're going to be interesting comments about that one. Look, at the end of the day, as a safety colleague of mine always says to his workers at the early morning toolbox briefs, I just want to see you leave the site each day to go home to your family or friends in one piece. Very sound advice. So let's get on with today's topic. Welcome to episode 4 by Grassroots Safety Conversations with Ross. And it's not another form. Not another form? What am I talking about? It's called the documentation paradigm. Why do we have so many documents? Why do people need to have 20, 100, 300 page documents to convince us about safety? Well, just remember, there's always a smoking gun when working with humans, and we all have an opinion on how to manage safety in the workplace. So just remember, this is my opinion, backed up with many, many years of writing documents, working with big folders worth 200-300 pages. Very, very confusing. So look, let's get started. Why does our OH&S management systems can have too little or too much information? Let's ponder about that. If we make it too simple, will people follow it? Hard to determine that one. Or if we make it too big, people use it as a computer stand, won't they? To prop things up. They'll say, there's a manual, it's over there in the corner, let's have a read of it. Look, it's interesting. I was challenged by this question just recently. The grey area, what you put in and what you don't put in. It's the interpretation of the individual to look at that information and can they understand it. It's a challenge. Look, I was auditing an organisation once and they had about 20 different forms. I asked the question why, because it just evolved that sort of way. So I challenged him, how can you make them smaller or smarter? And look, I must admit, 12, 18 months later, I did go back and do some revisit sites. They had culled them. I thought they'd done a great job from 20 down to 18. And really, is that really making it simple for the business? But I must admit, businesses don't understand what they're trying to do. Look, small businesses might have small risks and hazards, only need a couple of documents. Are they value adding to the business? I know some large businesses across multiple sites, they all vary from different sites, these documents they have. So you look at it, is it endless information we're after? No, it's got to be relevant, not relevant. We don't want anything that's not relevant in our document because no one will definitely read it. And can people understand what they're trying to tell you or guide you? I call that the gobbledygook factor because I've seen some documents, I've read them, and I don't even understand what they're trying to until I've had a conversation with the people. Look, I just love the gobbledygook word because it is, doesn't it? It's what are we doing? Let's clear that air. Let's get some clarity in what this document's trying to do or that checklist. Is it making us safer by having a 50 dot thing, yes, no, not applicable? What does that mean? Yes, it is okay, or no, it's not. And we don't put a comment to it, why it's not, and lock that information out or do something with that information. It's a challenge, isn't it? And then I'm going to throw that old word in, so far as reasonable practical, is the key issue, isn't it? So I've had some discussions with people. They want to make it so far as reasonable practical, but you get, look, I'm not going to be rude here, you get some people with, from a HR perspective, from an engineering perspective, from a compliance, quality control, they all want to have their little bit in that little area. And all of a sudden what was supposed to be a simple document to show you how to do something and with a checklist to make it, your job safe, it's got too complicated and too difficult to deal with. And then I look at, then that leads me to the next thing. Was it trivial? I call it, that's the trivial factor, isn't it? Minority of people versus the majority. You can use a blended approach. And what do I mean by minority and major? Well, a minority of people won't read it, will they? All right, majority still won't read it. So let's have a blended approach to that document. Only put the key things we need to have in that document. But what we forget, Australia is such a multicultural society, our language. I mean, can we keep the language simple? Because we all have different levels of understanding, education. What an office worker might see, what a confined space entry is, to an actual operator who goes in and out every day, is totally different, isn't it? So it's something to think about what you are looking at and putting in that document. And we also have cultural. Not everybody understands how I speak, with my Aussie English, and I have some friends that come from different ethnic backgrounds, and I have to listen to them because our words, our interpretation is difficult. So how can we make that simple in the way we do things? Documents can grow when we learn from incidents. We might have to put another couple of checklists or another couple of lines in there from an incident. But why? Was it a human error? Was it a cultural error? We don't know. We've got to think about that. We just, because an incident, let's put another couple of lines in there to make it safer. Is it really going to value add? When we get new equipment, I mean, that's another change from an old bit of equipment, like an old mower to a new mower. There's still a mower, it's how we operate it. And that's the analogy I use to people, still cuts grass. You don't need to be an expert in how to cutting grass. It's the actual apparatus you're using that makes it difficult. And then I mentioned in my previous podcast, but legislation. We can write a document. I've seen documents, people that copied the words out of the legislation, just rejigged it for their document. And is that going to get you out of court? Oh, it might, but it's not going to make it easy for the person to make it simple for you. So people say, let's make another form. And I ask them, why do you want to have another form when you've got one already? Why can't we review that, simplify it? If you know manager assistance, we look at the plan, do, check, act type of scenario. So we're planning, we're doing, we're checking, but we forget to act on and improve the document. Sometimes it's not relevant that what we have on these forms. Things change, which is a really classic thing. And then another thing you've got to be careful of is quality control. I've been to sites where the same document, you get used on one site, there's a different version on another site, and a different version on another site, and you challenge these people managing it, you've got too many documents. Can't you make it simple? Can't you go electronic? I'm going to lead on that electronic side of it. Well, as soon as you upload it, it's just one document. And I think electronic databases with checklists in them can make them simpler and more effective without creating big monoliths of documents to walk around in. I mean, gone are the days, I'm hoping that you see people walk around with their little clipboards with their multiple pages ticking boxes. But what are they doing with that documentation? What are they doing with that information they gathered? So when we think about that, we don't want to create another form on another form just because it looks good when the auditor comes along. We want to create a form that is workable to make our workplace safe and keeping it simple. We don't have to describe what it's doing. We need to have the information in that people can look at and create outcomes that befits their work they're doing it. And look, I always say on the other side, once you've done all this, reviewed your forms, is it valuable? And is it creating a safe workplace? That's the challenge you've got to put in there if you're a safety person or just a manager or whatever you are in your job. Is this value adding? Am I just creating another form just because it looks good? And when the inspector comes along and says, I do all these forms, they're going to ask the same question. Is it creating a safer workplace for you? Or are you just creating a more burden on the worker to do the work and not being proactive to get his job done, which puts pressures on him? If he spends 2 hours doing a form, filling it in, and he's got a 2-hour job, and the time and the money doesn't add up. I'm going to have a little of advice here. Now, I mentioned in the previous podcast about Greg Smith, a book he wrote around paper safe, Read the Triumph of Bureaucracy in Safety Management. It's a great read on this subject. And look, I recommend people have a look at it. It's the same thing what I'm saying. What you need, you only use what you need. Don't create another document for the sheer bloody hell of it. And if you don't have a robust form, ask you, why not? Why am I creating another form when the original one can be adapted or improved to do what you need to do? All right, but I must admit, the bottom line of all this comes back to when you get asked a question by a person, let's create another form, you say, yes, Your Honour. You probably noticed I mentioned that before. We create a document that makes us look safe. So when you go to court of law, you say, I created this document, Your Honour, to make our workplace safer. It ain't going to work if it's not value adding or not making it safer. So look, the bottom line when it comes around documentation, yes, we do need to have some sort of level of documentation in doing what we do on a day-to-day basis. But be mindful of what you want to achieve in doing that document. I know it's a challenge, and I can probably talk about a lot longer than what I want to talk about it, but think about the bottom line. Are you value adding to your organisation? Well, that's it for that one. All right. Thanks for listening and enjoy. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope it's been of some benefit. So it's good to think about your family and friends and how working safely will get you home to them. It's always a challenge, isn't it, listening and trying to discern what I'm talking about. But let me know if you've got any issues and that sort of stuff. Look, I'm on Instagram, Grassroots Safety with Ross. That's where I can notify when the next podcast is available, and you can email me at grassrootssafety@outlook.com. Yes, Grassroots Safety is all one word. And if you have a topical query on what I discuss on this podcast, let me know. Shoot me a thing in the comments. Happy to have a conversation or do a podcast about it. More than happy about that. And look, this podcast is sponsored by Safety Zone, a Victorian-based safety consulting firm based in Victoria, Australia, as I just mentioned. And look, I do not receive any financial support from them, just moral support, and I do need a lot of that in doing these podcasts. And hopefully one day my daughter will give me a hand to do the Instagram post a bit better, but I'm getting there slowly. So until next time, my friends, live long and prosper, as Spock would say.